Air India has just dropped a bombshell that is shaking the foundations of the aviation industry. A hidden discovery inside the Boeing 787 from flight AI-171 has come to light, and it's far more disturbing than anyone imagined. For weeks, speculation filled the air mechanical failure, sabotage, even software glitches. But the preliminary report now confirms something few expected. The engines didn't fail. The aircraft didn't malfunction. Instead, investigators uncovered a cockpit action so unusual, so deliberate, that it has triggered urgent reviews across the globe. What really happened inside that Dreamliner may force aviation to rethink everything it thought was secure. Air India flight AI-171 had just taken off from Ahmedabad on a routine journey to London. The Boeing 787 was in good condition, the crew was experienced, and the weather offered no challenges. Everything pointed to a normal departure. But less than a minute after liftoff, the aircraft began to lose thrust. The jet dropped rapidly and struck a residential area near the airport, leaving a path of destruction. No distress call was sent. The descent was too fast, too sudden, and too precise to be random. From the outside, it looked like a catastrophic mechanical failure. But as investigators examined the wreckage, they found no signs of engine damage or structural faults. The systems hadn't failed. The aircraft hadn't broken apart. Something else had caused it to fall, and it was hidden inside the cockpit. When investigators accessed the flight recorders, what they found shifted the entire direction of the case. Both engine fuel control switches had been moved from run to cut off just seconds after takeoff. These switches are protected by a mechanical lock and are never used during flight. For them to be moved mid-air requires deliberate, physical action, and yet, there it was in the data. No sign of technical failure, no software malfunction, just two manual inputs that shut off both engines almost instantly. Investigators confirmed the fuel switches were not faulty. They did exactly what they were designed to do. The engines stopped because they were commanded to. What makes this revelation even more alarming is the level of protection built into these systems. Each switch requires a guarded lift and twist movement, intentionally designed to prevent accidental activation. Both switches being moved mid-climb implies a deliberate sequence of actions, something that goes far beyond any checklist or approved procedure. That one decision, recorded in a sliver of black box data, transformed a stable climb into an unrecoverable descent. It took only a few seconds, but the consequences rippled far beyond the flight path. Now, the investigation pivoted, no longer focused on mechanical failure. It sought to understand the human decision behind those critical seconds that sealed the fate of AI-171. Focus turned to the two pilots who operated the flight. Both were certified on the 787 with thousands of hours of experience. According to procedures, the first officer was handling the controls while the captain monitored. Nothing unusual had been noted before takeoff. Inside the cockpit voice recorder, a short exchange was captured. One voice asked, "Why did you cut off?" And the other replied, "I didn't." It was brief, tense, and left investigators with more questions than answers. No checklist calls for shutting off fuel switches after liftoff. The switches were returned to run seconds later, but it was already too late. The engines couldn't recover in time. The aircraft had no altitude left to save itself. And the critical action that triggered it all remained unexplained. Accidental movement of both switches seemed almost impossible. Each one is protected by a lift and turn guard, designed to prevent errors. For both to be moved mid-flight, in sequence, takes deliberate effort. That detail changed everything about how the event was viewed. Could it have been confusion under pressure, or a misread of cockpit layout? Investigators started digging into training logs, simulator sessions, and recent duty schedules. They wanted to know if fatigue or stress could have played a role in a critical mistake. But another possibility emerged. What if this wasn't a mistake at all? With no clear technical fault and no external interference, attention turned fully to the human element. And that turned a technical investigation into something far more complex. With no system failure found, investigators began to examine cockpit design. The 787 is built for safety, but experts questioned whether the layout of critical switches could lead to confusion during high workload moments. In theory, the safeguard should be enough, but under pressure, theory doesn't always match instinct. Some argued that, in a fast-moving situation, even experienced pilots might misidentify controls. It wasn't about negligence, it was about how design and human behavior interact in the most stressful seconds of flight. Attention also returned to a 2018 FAA bulletin warning of potential issues with fuel switch handling. At the time, it was seen as a low-risk advisory. After AI 171, it suddenly felt far more urgent and no longer theoretical. India's Aviation Authority quickly ordered inspections on all Boeing aircraft with similar fuel systems. Air India completed the checks, finding no defects. The switches were working as intended. The engine shut down not from failure, but from direct input. Pilot unions pushed back against early conclusions. They warned that blaming the crew too soon could overlook deeper issues. Fatigue, training gaps, or design flaws might have contributed, and they called for a full, unbiased investigation into every possible factor. Meanwhile, regulators worldwide began reviewing cockpit interfaces and emergency procedures. AI 171 was no longer seen as an isolated event. It had become a warning sign, forcing the industry to re-examine how humans and machines interact when every second counts. As the investigation moved forward, the emotional weight of the case grew. Families demanded more than technical answers. They wanted to understand how a modern aircraft could fall without warning or failure. For many, the official findings were not enough. Some air traffic controllers involved in the flight stepped away from duty, shaken by how quickly it all unfolded. Investigators themselves admitted this was not a typical case. The human element, more than the mechanical, was what made AI 171 so difficult to process. The crash became more than a technical event. It became a reflection of how fragile even the most advanced systems can be when one moment of human action overrides everything else. A reminder that aviation is never just about machines. AI 171 triggered immediate changes behind the scenes. Training centers began adding scenarios involving fuel switch errors during takeoff. Airlines reviewed cockpit briefings, and regulators opened discussions about interface design and crew workload during critical phases of flight. Boeing faced calls to reassess how critical controls are positioned and labeled. Even without confirmed design flaws, the focus shifted from hardware failure to human interaction. It was no longer just about what went wrong, but how it was even possible in the first place. The incident exposed a blind spot in how aviation prepares for the unexpected. It showed that even in highly automated environments, rare human actions can still bypass every safeguard. That realization is now forcing change across the industry. When both engines shut down, the aircraft's automatic safety systems activated as designed. The ram air turbine, or RAT, deployed instantly. This small propeller is driven by airflow and supplies limited electrical and hydraulic power in emergencies. It kept the flight instruments, essential avionics, and minimal flight control systems online. But the RAT cannot restart the engines or provide full power to critical systems like cabin pressurization, full hydraulics, or engine ignition. The aircraft remained flyable in theory, but at low altitude and with no thrust, there was no time or altitude to recover. Despite all automated backups functioning, the Dreamliner still descended uncontrollably. This highlighted a hard truth. Modern aircraft depend heavily on sustained engine power for both flight and survival systems. The Boeing 787 followed every programmed response correctly. The failure wasn't in the automation, it was in the command that started it all. Back in 2018, the FAA issued a special airworthiness information bulletin warning that under certain conditions, the fuel control switches on Boeing aircraft could be vulnerable to improper handling. The document wasn't mandatory, but it advised operators to inspect labeling and switch protections. At the time, the advisory drew little attention. No major incidents had occurred, and the risk was classified as minimal. But after AI 171, that same bulletin resurfaced in safety circles. Investigators now believe its recommendations could have helped prevent this tragedy if enforced more strictly. India's Aviation Authority has since mandated immediate reviews of all aircraft with similar switch designs. What was once dismissed as a low-priority advisory has now become central to understanding how one overlooked warning may have set the stage for a global aviation crisis. What do you think truly happened inside that cockpit? Was it human error, design flaw, or something deeper we've yet to understand? This case is sparking debates across the aviation world, and your take matters. Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more investigations that reveal what really happens behind the controls.